Hello everyone and welcome back to the Milu project. Today we're going to be talking about the linguistic history of the British Isles. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and tune in next week for our video on the IPA charts. Anyway, let's begin. Our story starts back in 3000 BC. At this time, many Neolithic peoples, similar but not related to the Basques, arrived from the east. Not much is known about these people. Then, the Celts invaded in 1200 BC from mainland Europe. The Celts spoke a language known as Common Brittonic, which they spread through the British Isles. Here are the language's consonants, and here were its vowels. It probably, in its early stages, also had labiovelars, although we'll get to those in a minute. The vowels also had these long variations. The language also had these cases. However, Common Brittonic didn't stay a unified language forever. It split into two distinct dialects, Goidelic in Ireland and Brittonic in Great Britain. At the moment, these dialects are still very much mutually intelligible. However, they have different methods of dealing with the Indo-European q sound. These dialects eventually formed language groups, but for now, let's look at the dialects before they begin to diverge. The Goidelic dialect developed into primitive Irish. It had these sounds, and as demonstrated here, it hadn't fully discarded that q sound. This sound also looks quite interesting though. With Brittonic, we know that the language was spoken throughout most of Great Britain, but unfortunately, it left no records. It can, though, be reconstructed using the comparative method, and inferences can be made upon this information. In the year 43 AD, the Romans invaded the south of England. They spoke Latin and left quite a noticeable impact. But to find out more, you can check out this video. At the same time, a group of Celts from Ireland, called the Scotti, invaded Scotland, displacing the Brittonic peoples, and forming a dialect continuum stretching all the way from the south of Ireland, through the Isle of Man, and throughout much of eastern Scotland. As soon as the Roman Empire collapsed in Britain, groups of Scandinavians began to settle, and by the 8th century, they controlled much of Britain. These Anglo-Saxons were speakers of a Germanic language, which later developed into Old English. These were Old English's consonants, and these were its vowels, which also had these long variations. Old English had the nominative, accusative, genitive, dative, and instrumental cases, as well as masculine, feminine, and neuter. Here's an example of Old English. As you can see, it looks nothing like modern English. And despite the fact that this is a sample from a later time, it still gives you a rough idea of how this language diverged from some of the other Germanic languages. Then, at about the same time, the Vikings invaded. They were speakers of Old Norse and quickly invaded England, controlling an area known as Danelaw. These were the sounds in Old Norse, nothing too out of the ordinary. Old Norse was a Germanic language, and so it had masculine, feminine, and neuter, as well as these cases. as well as bringing about a few grammatical and semantic conventions. Many Viking words also entered the language. For example, our days of the week come from the names of some of the Norse deities. The Vikings also brought in the pronoun they, which displaced the Anglo-Saxon he. The third person conjugation also changed from eth to s. The next group to invade were the Normans. They originated from Normandy in France and were speakers of a northern variety of French, which had already been heavily influenced by Norse. They also brought many Latin words to English, as well as these additions. However, very annoyingly, they changed English's writing system. Just think, if the Normans were just a little bit more thoughtful, you wouldn't have words like this. Here's an example of what English would have been like in the early 15th century. It's very different, isn't it? Anyway, while English evolved, some of the other native languages retreated. However, due to conservation efforts, Welsh, Irish, Gaelic, and to some extent, Scottish Gaelic are widely spoken today. Cornish and Manx have just been revived though, and it will be a while before we can determine their survival. Anyway, that's all for this week. Be sure to like, subscribe, and as always comment if you have any questions. I'll see you next week for our episode on the IPA charts. Bye!